This podcast is not sponsored by anyone but the people who produce it. So this podcast is produced by Atlas Media Solutions. Atlas Media Solutions is a full-service media production company exclusively serving the agriculture industry. We have the mission statement of trying to serve agriculture every single day. And that's through creating high-quality marketing material for our clients, through posting on social media every day, through not just Clayton's page, who is the business owner, the guy talking right now, but also creating content for Denton Farms, the agriculture podcast, the Field Journal podcast, as well as a list of other things that we put out on a weekly basis for you guys to listen to. And so once again, this podcast is not sponsored, but it is produced by us, and we are proud to say we serve this industry exclusively, and we love it, and we want to be a part of it for the rest of our future. So if you know anyone who could use services like ours, please feel free to send them our website. It'll be linked in the description. Enjoy. I'm just like, I can't get over like almost everyone I know who golfs. It's like you just want to be known as a golfer. Like, do you actually like playing, or do you like driving a golf cart around and drinking all day? And it's usually the latter one. It's like I like spending $150 just to play for a day and then drink a ton of beer at the same time.
It's obscene how much it costs to play in some of these clubs now.
Well, start talking about membership fees for like years. You know, you got guys who are maybe making like $45,000-$50,000 a year, spending like $5,000 to $7,000 on an annual golf membership. It's like. Come on, guys. Like, that is a significant portion of your income spent on something you will never get any money back from, ever. You will never be good enough to make money. I don't know.
It's one of them things where, like, you know, I guess if it's what you love or whatever, but it does seem like unless you're using it for business or something, it's a waste of money.
Yeah, I could see it from like a business and like fundraisers. That's where you get your nonprofit. It's like, oh, just get a bunch of rich guys who are already going to spend a bunch of money on golf to donate some money to a golf tournament.
Yeah, and then they're drinking a little bit, and they really get loose with their wallet.
Oh, yeah. We went to that Nog fundraising event. Yeah, you're literally open as like, drink as much as you can because we want as much as your money as we can get.
What'd the basket of oranges bring?
Like thousands. It was thousands of dollars for oranges. You know, there's no camera, but like literally like a basket full of oranges. Like one hand.
5 pounds.
Yeah, something. It was ridiculous.
It was.
So proof that if you get anyone to drink enough, they will probably start writing checks.
And competing. You
know? Oh my gosh, yeah. Especially guys in that realm, they're just like,
yeah.
Let's compare. Let's see what's going on, guys. Who's got the bigger checkbook here, and who's really swinging today?
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I was thinking we can talk about twofold for mostly my podcast, updating where we're at, kind of where we've been, and leading on from that. Kind of leadership development and then like people development, and then lead that into your podcast. So talking about like leadership in general in the ag community. Cause I was thinking about that after our conversation yesterday about truckers. It's like, man, like the farms that are going to survive are probably going to have pretty good leadership. Like they're going to be the ones that have like a solid either leadership plan or just good people at the helm who can get other people behind them to then get them to follow them. Like those are going to be the farms that are surviving. The ones who have strong leaders who are like leading from the front, not just writing the check and leaving. So.
No, I agree. I mean, it seems to me like the most successful farms are transitioning now to H2A.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you kind of hate to see that, but I guess if there's, you know, not any available labor in your town, that's what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's more of like, I don't know. I just see it, and I see everyone's answering with the question of autonomy. Like, let's just automate everything. Let's just get the people out of the tractors. Let's get the people out of the field, and that'll solve all our problems. But it's just like, we're heading down this direction. It's like, okay, that's a great idea in theory. But like even today, you know, I was out in a field with a drone sprayer. There's a guy switching a battery and filling it every 10 minutes, if not 8, you know, just because they take and that technology will get better, but there's still so much manual stuff that needs to be done that I'm just like, okay, that can't be our only answer. At some point, we're going to run into a problem for competing for H2A workers, because at what point are people going to say, I don't want to come to the U.S. anymore? You know, why go there when Brazil has a better, you know, immigration program for stuff like that? Or, you know, who knows which country it could be. I think we're going to start running into that of like, okay, so how are we going to get people to keep working here?
You know, I saw, or I was watching a special on YouTube or TikTok. It was about, it was a mini series about a produce farmer, and he was talking about the increase in wages that he's had on his H2As, and he said, they had been profitable for about 30 years, but the last couple of years they haven't been able to turn a profit because the crops that he grew were so labor intensive, and the government had gone up so much on the H-2A labor that it was not profitable, and they were considering shutting the business down.
Yeah, I mean we're gonna keep running into that if we continue, the commoditization of everything. Especially now, like COVID and all the inflation that's happened since then has proven people actually don't want to pay more for their food, which is sad because people who pay more for their food, in an ideal world, the producer would end up with some more money in their pocket, not always scraping by every year, especially years like this. But clearly, this past year and a half has shown, okay, well, people don't enjoy paying 10, 20% more for their food, because like if you look at the jump, it is, yes, more expensive, but it's not a drastic increase. Like, I don't think my grocery budget has increased by 100%. It hasn't doubled. I'd say maybe 25, 30%, like year over year increase. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not always doing the grocery shopping, but clearly we've got this. So where, like, I don't know. I see this mounting problem of like, okay, labor is getting more expensive. We have less labor than we ever have. People don't want to pay more for their food. So what's the route forward other than more government subsidies?
Yeah, it's a difficult problem we're facing, I think, on the production side.
And that's why I sent you that podcast, and I'll link this one below. We're starting to implement the EOS operating system into our business. So if for anyone who's listening who doesn't know that, that would be the entrepreneurial operating system. So it's a lot of just organization and just some more clear, defined roles, defined accountability, and just kind of more structure for your people. Someone, I think the CEO described it in his book as, this is people energy management. So it's managing your people's energy in an effective way. So it's trying to get the most out of your people without burning them out, without, having unmet expectations or unspoken expectations. So anyway, as I was listening to this one podcast by this organization that does all this leadership training and the operating system training, all these different things, and it was a 30,000 acre farmer in Canada. And I was like, this is fascinating. I don't hear many farmers talking about this. We've got scaled farms and everything like this, but this guy took all these operating procedures, all these principles. So lots of leadership training, lots of clear expectations and rules, and not rules, roles for each of their employees. And he said, this is how I'm going to run my farm. I'm going to put the right people in the right spots, and each person's going to have their own roles and responsibilities, and they're going to be clear and defined. And on top of that, he's one of the only farmers I've ever heard of who has overtime pay for his employees, which is crazy. And, Canadian labor laws are a little different than ours, but still, he took the idea of like, okay, we have our busy seasons. Should my employees' families suffer for their husbands, their dads being gone nonstop during harvest and planting? He's like, I don't think that's right. We can make it work. We're good with, at 30,000 acres, you're pretty good with your money, I'm assuming. So they were able to pencil it out. But I just saw what he was doing. I said, okay, this guy is looking forward, not backward. He's saying, okay, how are we going to be here for the next 100 years? Not what did it take to get here the past 100 years? What are we going to do going forward? And I think what he was talking about, and I'll link that podcast, was very, okay, there is a way forward for people who are willing to put in that effort. And I thought, okay, that's a step in the right direction as far as leadership goes on a farm. And so I just was listening to that. I was like, okay, I did not expect to hear this. Like, it was a very business-centered podcast. I did not expect to hear that from a farmer. So
yeah, I mean, I think for this is just overall in agriculture, the market, the free market will find a way. Mm-hmm. So even you hear all this doom and gloom, but there will be a portion of producers that are successful in this market, and I don't know, it's gonna sift a lot of them out probably.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how, consolidation probably isn't the right term, but I mean, it's going to keep consolidating. I mean, we're driving around, driving down here is always a stark realization. You come from Iowa, that's still got at least some life in its small towns. You start kind of heading farther south into, okay, wow, these towns, even Barlow, 20 minutes away, you look at the state that town is in, it's like, okay, probably 50 years ago, this was a thriving community with 5 times the producers in the area that there are now funneling money back in. Well,
over 100, I think, producers,
sheesh.
And now we're down to like 17 families or maybe even less here, so in
Yeah.
this area.
And you think the effect that has not just on, I mean, I've heard it from two people recently. It's not just, it's not just the producers who are suffering, it's their communities. It's these rural communities that had a lot of lifeblood because there were more people on more farms, bringing more take home pay typically for each individual person than a larger entity. And, we've moved to this point where now, because of scaled agriculture, okay, we can farm with less people. We need less management. We need less hands-on labor. Well, let's, these people move to the city, and these rural towns start to suffer for it. And I'm yet to see, a good model of a small town saying, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to combat this problem?
The sad part is I don't even think they're looking to combat it. They're not even thinking like that. They're just living with what's there and not even putting a second thought into it, not trying to spur any kind of development or anything. It's pretty sad, really.
Yeah, and I know the USDA has a couple like very low priority programs that I've looked into just on some of my rural research and all this stuff of, hey, what is the state of rural America today? And rural America would be probably what conservatives would describe as the last lifeblood of America, the people who truly keep the wheels turning on everything else, especially back when manufacturing was huge, and probably a little less so, but still there's this huge portion of the population that still lives more or less sparsely located in these places that are left to pick up the scraps of everyone else living in the city. And it's interesting to see how little it gets talked about on the government level and even the business level. There's not a lot of businesses who say, well, let's make rural America a target, other than places like Dollar General, because their primary consumer is people who are typically a little lower income in the middle of nowhere who have nowhere else to shop. So
Yeah, it's our little towns are in sad states. They were once thriving little communities with hardware stores and all your other little, you know, businesses that prop the farms up or that assisted the farms in their efforts. And when they, and this is part of farm consolidation. Farm consolidation caused, you know, the big farmer to go and he picks, a certain business, and it might not even be in that community to do his certain task, like the tire man, or whatever. Could be a possibly neighboring community, and so it leaves the one that's always been in your community out. And I guess that's part of the market too. But then that business dies, and then his employees have to go find new jobs. The one ray of hope I think that I've seen here in the last couple of years since COVID is all the remote workers. Like our town here has really good high speed internet, and so we've had several families move in that can work remotely, and they like the low cost of living here. Generally speaking, I mean, it's still a high cost of living, but cheaper than like LA or
Nashville.
even Michigan or Nashville. Yeah. And, and so because of that, we've had some pretty good families move in here, and they have conservative values, it seems, good small town values, I guess.
I mean, you have good relationships with people at the USDA and everything. Do you know of anything that like Kentucky's specifically doing to try to keep some, lifeblood in these towns or anything like that? Do you know of any, like, are there any programs at your guys' level that you have been told about or have access to that are trying to stimulate that?
Well, I know that Jonathan Sheila is, he's just our newly elected ag commissioner, and he's at the state level, but he is really focused on trying to spur some development into these small towns. And it's, I think he's kind of taking the route of like, putting end users for our commodities in place, and so those end users then bring jobs, and I think one of his his thoughts are if he can get 5 or 6 new commodity end users into the state, spread out into the rural communities, that will begin to, you bring the construction jobs, but you also bring those plant jobs of, if it's an ethanol plant or a canning facility, you bring those people that are in that community in to work in that business, and then it gives them a career path, that they didn't have before. So,
Yeah. Is a part of that new canola crush plant going in? Is that a part of that?
I think that was all set up before Jonathan came in, but he's got his eye on some other ones, and I don't think he's told me a little bit about them, but I don't think I'm at liberty to disclose them yet. But he is working on it, and it's some pretty serious players that have looked really seriously at the state, and I bet he lands a couple of them. He's a go getter.
Yeah. I mean, especially with I mean, you got the river right there. So not only could you bring stuff in from other states if you wanted to, I mean, you've got access to. I was looking at a map recently. And I was like, you guys have a lot of city centers outside of Kentucky that are still within
We do.
driving distance.
Memphis, Nashville,
Yeah.
Kansas City's still pretty close. Cincinnati, Lexington, Louisville,
Yep. Yeah, you got all these places.
Evansville.
Yeah, you got these places that are still within reason within the area. I mean, it's hard to think about because the U.S. is huge.
Yeah. 3 to 6 hours from a lot of major
3 to
USs.
6 hours for a trucker isn't that much.
No.
You know, moving something from somewhere like Kansas City that's clear on the other side of Missouri in 6 hours is actually pretty reasonable. I mean, that's a round trip for any trucker who wants to work a 12-hour day. I mean,
We're 8 hours from Chicago, to our north, and 8 hours to New Orleans to our south.
yeah, I mean,
So we're very centrally located here. Rail, and we also have two of the largest petroleum pipelines in the United States flowing right through here too. So
yeah, I mean, you guys are positioned well, given the right people in the right place to capitalize on that from an agriculture perspective. Because, I feel like in Iowa, maybe this is just my opinion. I feel like we get so wrapped. We are such a corn and soybean state that it's like we are never looking past ethanol or biodiesel. Like that's all we're ever looking at, and it's just like, okay, what else could be here if we could stop growing such monster corn?
yeah, I mean, I think, and we're probably going to have to find that out going forward in the next 10 years. I just
I mean, it's crazy. We could probably listen to a podcast from a couple months ago, and we're talking about corn and soybeans, not being the future of, American commodity farming, and now we're looking at this as like, okay, well, 350 corn's kind of just around the corner, in an era where everything costs $5+ to grow per acre. Okay, when is that going to tick back up? Yeah, I don't think it matters who gets elected. I think there's going to be some, especially either way, we're going to end up with some sort of economic depression, whether that's nationwide or just farm wise. I mean, we start introducing tariffs on our exports to certain countries. I mean, that's going to put a damper on a lot of our stuff. And that could go either way. And so we're looking at a spot of, okay, the route forward can't be crop insurance for the next 10 years. Mind you, some massive weather events or Brazil totally collapsing. I mean, looking forward, I'm not saying there's no hope because there's always hope. But looking forward, we've got this industry that has a lot of questions to ask. And I feel like we're not really asking a lot of them. We're just saying, oh man, the markets suck. This is a bummer. It's like, okay, why do they suck? And what are we going to do about it next time? Because this happens every 10 years. We all know this,
And it's really seems, since this really, I mean, I guess as long as time's been going, but you have small bull runs, but they're very short lived, and then you're right back in the basement again. It's just it's just a compounding problem. The problem is now is inflation is just absolutely taking the wind out of everybody's sails, because it costs so much to do business, and because of that, with the commodities having basically no money in them. It just made it very difficult to operate. I saw where Illinois Farm Bureau the other day said, I think it was Illinois Farm Bureau, said that the average Illinois producer that grew corn would, if he owned land, it was slightly profitable, but if he was renting land, at minimum, it was a $110 loss by their calculations.
Yeah. I've had that conversation with a bunch of people. I was just up in South Dakota, and South Dakota, you're looking at anywhere from 3,000 on the low end to 15, 20,000 per acre. And, I'm living in Iowa where we're seeing those 27, 28, $30,000 an acre. We're reaching this point where it's like, okay, cool, you've got an investor in your back pocket, but this farmland, like we've built this house of cards that's like we're spending a ton of money on land. It's barely profitable, if even at all this year. And the money has to flow in to make those mortgage payments, because if it doesn't, well, the banks start calling. But what happens, say our area, say everything around us is anywhere from that 25-ish to 30-ish thousand an acre range. What happens when, the money dries up and investors say this is a crappy investment. Shoot, we're having to dump more money just to keep this farmland afloat. I mean, we're sitting in a situation where it's like, okay, this is great. We're gonna need some $5-6 corn, or else
Yeah, we're going to sell our investment.
we're going to sell our investment, and
Yeah.
then all these ag banks are going to be we just lost a huge portion of our revenue. We're out a bunch of money. Now everyone starts calling. Boom, we've got an ag bank run. That's I've thought about switching banks purely for that. I mean, what happens if that happens?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean that, and I, maybe invest in institutional money is here, and that couldn't happen. I don't know, but I think they didn't think it could happen in the '80s either, and it did. So,
it's funny the amount of similarities I've heard mentioned. It's like, So a lot of guys were saying stuff like this in the '80s. It's okay. It's going to pick back up. We're good. It's all right. And
it did. It just took 10 years.
uh-huh.
And I think that's probably I think just nationwide, we're probably in that when you quantitative ease or you print money without concern of how much you're printing. At some point, you got to pay the piper, and we're probably at that point now.
Yep.
And I don't think they can easily go back and, I've heard some economists say, well, you could just start easing again, well, I guess you could, but I think then people realize they're probably already realizing now that cash has very limited value, American cash, and you continue to quantitative ease, and then you could you really would maybe see the wheelbarrow to buy the loaf of bread.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was talking to a guy who runs a media company up in the Minneapolis area the other day, and he was, we were talking about things. He was asking how we were doing. I'm like, things are pretty good. We're hiring. We're continuing to grow. And then he, I was like, bar the economy not totally crashing, we're sitting really good for 2025. He's like, oh, don't worry, the economy's not going to crash. And I'm like, well, maybe up in the cities where you guys have endless construction money just flowing in from all these venture capitalists who just love to have new companies and businesses show up. I was like, we're in a part in a world where 2 days before I had people working for a bigger ag company saying, how are you guys doing? I mean, we've been told all of our budgets are cut this year, all these things. It's just like these totally two different worlds that people don't realize exist of like people in the city, other than their higher food prices and their higher Starbucks prices, thinks everything's great. And then we've got everyone in the ag community like, man, this year kind of sucks,
Yeah, and I guess that's true. I mean, I tend to think that it always reaches the ag community first, and then it kind of trickles down into the rest of the industry. So if we're seeing it now, it may be a couple of years, but probably everybody's going to get to
I'm
suffer
not.
some pain.
I give myself too much credit for saying things ahead of time, but I was saying in 2020 when all of our fertilizer prices and all of when everything in the ag industry doubled in price, I was like, all right, in about 2 years, everyone's food's going to cost a lot more. And no one believed me in COVID. No one. No, like, oh, whatever, it'll balance itself out. It's just stimulus money, all these things. And I'm sitting here, we're 4 years out now. And what's happening? Record inflation, food's super expensive.
Sure, yeah.
Like, everyone's complaining. I was like, okay, guys, there's some pretty clear cause and effects here. And it's okay for corrections to happen. They happen. I mean, 2008, if it had not have happened, would have been much worse than 2008 ended up being. Easier for me to say when I was not running a business during 2008. But like corrections happen, and I would much prefer us to have a slow correction like we're having right now. If it can just continue to, if the whole economy has to slow for 5 years, I'd rather that than the floor dropping out on every single person.
100%.
That's manageable.
Yeah.
And people who are living in this bubble is like everything's okay, everything's great, the economy's gonna pick back up. It's like, okay, well, throw some money on the fire, keep throwing it, because at some point that fire is going to consume you. It's just,
I think what it's the most unfair to is the kids that are currently getting out of school now. Because basically the elites, took the money and stashed it and ran. And because of that, it's going to be very difficult for this generation that's upcoming to own anything of value because everything has an artificially inflated price tag.
Yeah.
And
I mean, if you took money out of the equation, I think of it very much as like, okay, we're back into the era of landowners and non-landowners. The landowners, who would be these large, investors who have large stakes in who basically are just sitting on a crap ton of assets, regardless of cash. They own a lot of assets,
Sure.
and that gives them a ton of leverage. all of us non-landowners, quote unquote, all of us non-people like that are working for those people. We work for the people with a lot of money, which is no different than 1,000 years ago when the largest landowner had a bunch of people who didn't own land to work under them to work their land. You
Yeah, I
know,
mean, America's always been a land, traditionally of savers, and if and you got a reward if you saved your money because there's interest, But when they were quantitative easing, it basically penalized you for saving money. So if you went out and spent a bunch of money on real estate or hard assets, whatever it was that retained value, you basically got rich in just a few years.
yep,
And if you didn't have any money because you were working day to day, or you chose to spend it on cars
yeah.
or whatever, not real estate and not hard assets, you
Yeah.
wound up with nothing.
And now we're in this age of, okay, if your money that you're saving isn't returning 10 to 15%, you will fall behind everyone else. Which it's if you can name it, if you can't ever make that first leap into owning, unless you're, which I think people should save for 10, 15 years if that's what it takes for you to buy your first house. But we are kind of at that point where it's like, yeah, maybe you're 22, you just graduated college, and it's going to take you another 10 years just to even think about buying a house. Like, that's the new normal.
Yeah.
And that's just,
Yeah, it's just one of those. That's the consequences of the past 10 years or past 5 years, really,
which
post COVID.
which we can sit and complain about that all day long if we want. I grew up in California where that has been the norm for a decade. My entire childhood was what's happening right now of everything is getting more expensive. You can't afford anything. The only way for you to ever survive in this state is for you to make a crap ton of money and then come and buy something sometime later. That's kind of how California has been for a long time. So to lead this into a more hopeful discussion, because I don't want this to be us all doom and gloom in the economy of, guys, there's a real opportunity. There's opportunities right now that are coming about because of all this, because people like Neil and I, we can sit here and complain all day long, or we can say, take that step, take ownership and lead and do something. We were having this conversation with one of our customers today at lunch, Neil. We were talking about, a company like, the company we're working with today. They are very much a new guard company of these old guard businesses that have been around for, anywhere from 40 to 70 years now, who have existed, especially in the ag space. In the ag space, we've got these old guard companies that are big, they're bloated, and they are more or less operating the same way they were, 50 years ago. There's a bunch of new businesses popping up that we happen to, be a part of and help our customers grow with that. But they're ones that I could very easily see in 40 years being the same size as these old guard companies, quote unquote. And when I say old guard, I just mean an old business that has a large standing and has a lot of power. There's young guys out there getting after it who said, that's not going to be the reality for us or our company. So let's go do something about this.
Yeah, they just changed the model and then started companies that work with the new all the new technology we have, and yeah, because of that and mental ingenuity,
Yeah, there's a beauty in, and it's because I'm an entrepreneur and you're a farmer too. It's just, you're a forward thinking farmer. And I think a part of that is just because something was the way it is doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Yeah, I think there must be something about us psychologically, habit forming wise, that causes us to do the same thing over and over, and maybe that's why we think it's the right thing. But you got to be able to break that mold, and not break that mold, being willing to say, just because this is the way it's always been done, doesn't mean you have to keep doing that way. You can say, I can do something differently.
I thought while you were sitting there talking just then, you probably know this stat better than I do, or maybe know of it, but technology was really slow to double over the last 100 years, and then it was gradually increasing. Where I think it was maybe decades to double or something like that, and now it's every few minutes or something like that. Technology is double, or knowledge, and because of that, that gives huge opportunity. I mean, we've got all the information you could ever need to start any business you can imagine at your fingertips.
Yeah, I think our technology has slowed in adoption. I mean, I can't think what we had 10 years ago is still we're leagues ahead now, but it's not oh my gosh, the world has changed. It's not like the industrial revolution, but we are in this digital age now where you do have things like AI, which are still learning and still growing. But we're in this age where if you just stopped and look around, like we have more opportunity in this generation than we've ever had before, and it's not society's. Society doesn't have a duty to each one of us to make sure we all, have the best life possible. That is not society. We can't expect that out of society anymore. Maybe that's how it was, but we're in this age where it's like, okay, if you want to make a way for yourself, go do it. Don't wait around. And I was actually listening to another podcast talking about that and how they were doing it. Oh, it's a leadership book. It's actually a leadership book. And they were talking about how this current generation that is coming through the workforce feels more entitled to things than any other generation prior to it. They feel entitled to have a certain amount of things at their job and in their life that is an expected right. Which once again, we don't have to start complaining about kids these days or all these things. It's just like that is the reality of what's happened and where we are. And so even for me as an employer and you as an employer, it's like, okay, well, I can sit here and complain about how it's not as good as it used to be. Or I can say, okay, well, this generation may feel that way, but they probably also have access to some way more. I mean, we were talking about your daughter before we started this, who is leagues ahead of technology than you ever were at 12 years old and knows things that you don't know. And same here. Like, there's a wealth of information and opportunity that even for people that we might not 100% agree with, we can say, okay, they are headed in a direction that might be different, but that doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah. I think it's pretty amazing, really, like how, how technology has totally changed the game or the just the ability of people to work their way up. And I think people get wrapped up in the thought that, like you were saying, like how they feel entitled to things. But when you really look back at it worldwide over the last since recorded history started, most of the time people were basically in slave type environments or serf type environments, I guess, where they live in a community, but it's not like they're getting wealthy. They're more like in a tribal type state, and it's really only in Europe and really America in the last since 1940 or 50, there was one golden era of wealth creation, on for the middle class, and what it lasted up to about COVID, and then it was over. So, I mean, if you're a boomer, you were able to get wealthy, and the Gen Xers, and I mean, there was a lot of them that were able to live in that golden era, but prior to that, and now post to that, it's not going to be like that. There's going to be a very small group of winners and losers that are willing to be forward thinking and adapt to the new technology and all the new information out there that will, benefit from the information available to them. And then there will be a huge amount of people that will just fall by the wayside, and they're complainers and they're not willing to look at new ways they are like, well, nothing we've tried worked up to this point, so we just give up, and they'll just work a dead-end job or whatever.
Yeah. And I think, for everyone listening to this, it's like, oh man, like this is how it has to be. You got, and I think of things, I've been saying this for years. There's going to be two types of people, for I think the rest of my life at least, is there's going to be landowners and there's going to be people who work for landowners, whether that's for the business or an actual landowner. That's just kind of how things are headed, and maybe it'll change. Hopefully it does. I'm not here to predict the future, but you have the opportunity to either say, I can work my way to become said landowner, or I can find the right landowner to work for who I want to work for. I think that's the beauty of also a generation who feels entitled to a certain amount of things at their job or in their life. You, as that person who wants that, have the opportunity to choose where you do that. And I think that is kind of, where it's going to keep heading. And I think that is totally okay, because honestly, as someone who employs people now and deals with all that stress, as you're someone who owns land and has employees, it's like there is a certain level of stress that, and I don't think every person who runs a business feels this way, but I think most business owners or farmers or ranchers feel that way of like, especially if you employ people, there's a certain level of responsibility you feel, not just for the land you're taking care of, but the people and the organization that you are supposed to lead and take care of. There's a certain level of ownership that you have to take every day, or it will all fall apart.
100%. I don't think you can't be a good business owner and not care about the families that are inside of your business. If you're not thinking far enough ahead to preserve their being able to, you gave them a job and a livelihood, and it certainly weighs on you to be able to make sure your business performs to the level so they can upkeep at least what you've promised them. And I think that, if I'd say the vast majority of business owners, they care really passionately about their business and their employees and and the employees' families as well. I guess that's not everybody, but I'd say the vast majority do, and it weighs very heavily on them every night.
Yeah, I think especially heading into this age where labor is becoming harder to find, I think there's going to be more incentive for those who might not be caring about their employees to say, oh, this is no longer something I have the option to do. This is something that if I want to keep these people around for a long time, I need to invest heavily in them and invest heavily into who they are, not as just employees, but as people and leaders in their own homes, because you want those people showing up to work. I feel that way personally. Is I want everyone who shows up to work every day, hopefully, to have the healthiest home life possible. So that way, when they show up, they're putting their 100% in and not their 75, 60, 50%, because what they do at work every day leaves them in a worse state than when they came.
Oh, no doubt about it. Like, if as a business owner, you need to be totally in tune with how your employees are trained and the leadership they're given, and teaching them new things, and because you ultimately you want them to be able to be a benefit to your work, and not where you're constantly having to stand over and correct them. That's really not. That's not. Like, if you're paying them money and then you're coming back and redoing the job, or you're having to stand over and tell them every job to do, is that really the best efficiency or the best way to spend your money? I don't think so. I mean, to be a really effective leader of men and women, you have to develop them to the point where you don't have to tell them every task to do, that they know what has to be done. And you can give them minor directions, but hey, they know their job maybe even better than you know it. And a lot of times they can correct a problem before it even happens because they know their job so well. That's your responsibility to get them to that point, as a business owner, as a leader.
Yeah. Oh man. What do you think? Like, when did that click for you as someone who runs a farm, that's how your farm needed to run?
It clicked for me when really before I was in a leadership position at the farm. I saw my dad, who's the king of micromanagers, almost drive himself insane with, kind of hiring somebody that was multiple people that were just to perform manual tasks, I guess I should say. And but he was expecting more than that of them. Never giving them training, but expecting the world, and then they continually make mistakes. And my dad's a perfectionist, and he's not the type of person that wants to get all over you. He would just have to go redo everything, and so he would pay them to do things. They would continually make mistakes and or break things, and then he would have to come back around and clean it up or fix it, or task me with fixing it or cleaning the problem up or whatever. And it drove him insane, and one of the things that I told myself was, if I'm ever in the position of ownership on this farm or in any farm, I'm going to train my employee. I'm going to hire a type of employee that maybe I have to pay them more, and I have to provide them a better life. But in turn, they can provide me a better life because they are competent and willing to learn, and willing to find a better way than even maybe what I would show them. And so I think, when I think my dad thought I was crazy at first when got into a position to where I could hire my first employee. You know, I was willing to pay a little bit more, and then I was giving them tasks that were only reserved at that point for Dad and I. He wouldn't dare let an employee do maybe the planning or whatever. Where I've totally shifted the operation where I try to do minimum of all that stuff. I mean, I try to run the business and I do my fair share of all the work, but
Yeah, you'd probably say Blake's better at planning than you are now.
I mean, I love to I'm the manual labor guy out here. That's what I mean, I've got to where, like I want to be at home with my kids, and if you're an operator or, if you're a semi driver or whatever, you maybe don't get as much time to do that. But if you're sitting around here turning wrenches and stuff, it's a little bit easier to slip off a little early. And but you have to have really competent people to be able to perform those complicated tasks. You have to pay them more. You have to train them, and you have to provide a lot of leadership to get them to that point, so that they're a farmer and they're not just a worker or an employee or a hand, is what I always used to hear them called.
Yeah, I think that's like, you've said it before, is you don't want to hire farm hands forever. You want to have more farmers work. You want to have guys that if you died tomorrow would be farmers themselves and be able to run this farm without you.
I mean, I, I'm totally confident if I was to leave for a month from this place and just disappeared and they couldn't get a hold of me, that when I came back, it would be just as good as when I left, and it would probably be better. Because what I've noticed is if I take a leave of absence, like last year, I went to Idaho for a couple of weeks and visited some friends, and everybody picks their game up because they love where they work and they want to make me proud, and so because of that, when I came back, everything was done. I couldn't find anything that wasn't done, and
Well, I mean, that's a testament to your leadership too, of your employees look to you and they say, he is someone that I'm glad can go take 3 weeks, take 3 weeks off and go to Idaho. They're glad that you were able to do that, and they want to respect you in that by saying, you know what? He has gotten us to this point. It's okay for him to go on vacation. We can make sure it keeps running around here.
And I think for all, you should aim in any business to get to that point where your employees can take the business and they can succeed without you. If you've done that, then you've provided the best leadership that, you've benefited them and yourself as well.
And you would probably say, I mean, I just came back. I just took a vacation, but you could probably test this as well. You come back with clearer thinking when you can do things like that, and you don't feel that burden of I have to be here every day. Like the amount of stress your dad has probably felt his entire life of just making sure everything is done all the time is not something you feel like you have to carry all the time, which makes you a better decision maker.
100%. I'm 100% on that. The stress took my dad's life almost. He's still out here farming with us every day, but the amount of burden I saw him carry for 30 years was unimaginable. I don't see how he did it really. It's just a testament to his willpower, because he certainly didn't have the capable labor system to. I mean, he had laborers, but they were very unskilled, untrained, and hardworking, great people. Love all those people that worked here, but not skilled.
They
farmers.
were laborers, not leaders.
That's right. Yeah, and now I feel like we have a lot of young guys out here, but they're highly skilled, and they have lots of brain power. And they help. The funny thing is they come from very humble backgrounds, but they've turned into exemplary people. Just because of And Dad's jumped on board now with pouring into him, and he's got a vast amount. I mean, his skill sets are incredible, and he loves to teach them, even though, like when you come to you meet my dad, you seem like what if you was to meet him, you're like, man, he's he's kind of mean and standoffish, you know. But he really does love the people out here and pours into them and teaches them, you know, what all he has to offer, which is a ton.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be I wouldn't even be a hundredth of what I am without the things he's taught me over the last 45 years.
Yeah. I mean, I look at Logan all the time. And it's like, I mean, you said Logan basically came to you,
As a high school dropout.
yeah, the high school dropout,
14.
And not only did he come here, he left at some point, came back because he said, no, this is actually the place I want to work. And I mean, now he's kind of spinning it off on his own, more or less, is starting, he wants to go and do his own trucking thing, but still work on the farm and things like that. Like, he probably was able to do basically nothing but mow lawns and sweep bins when he first started, and now he's out there driving truck every single day, loves it, can probably do half the service things that need to be done on every piece of equipment you guys own. You could stick him in the combine probably to run for a few hours and you wouldn't have to stress too bad.
Yeah, I had a on National Day of Prayer, I was the MC at one of our community events out there, and it was right in the middle of corn planting, and I was planting one of my favorite fields out there, and really high production spot. And I told Logan, I said, "Hey, go out there and jump on that corn planter," and he was like, "No way," and I was like, "Oh yeah, you can do it," and he jumped out there and planted the whole. It was a storm was coming in that night. He got the whole thing planted, while I was out there at the church. So
And he got in there and he did it.
he got
and
in
he
there.
said,
He had already had a good enough skill set that he knew what to look for, and he basically knew what he needed to know to get the task done, and he got it done.
that's awesome.
It is.
And maybe it'll be your highest yielding crop ever.
Usually it's beginner's luck.
Yeah, you're just gonna be growing 400 bushel of corn in Kentucky, and Logan's gonna come up and he's like, "Neil, I'm running the planter all next year."
If we bang out a 400, he's running it from now on. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, yeah, I think that's a good way for us to transition now into part 2 of the podcast. Which, if you guys are listening to this on Neil's podcast, I am Clayton. You can jump over to my podcast, Field Journal, to listen to part 2 of this. I will put that link in the episode description, or just type in Field Journal on whatever podcast platform you listen to, where we will continue talking about what it looks like to just lead in business and hopefully develop your people, or even develop yourself into the best person you could possibly be, but also help either your farm or your business succeed without you, which is the true test of a good business. Is, will it continue to go on if you left tomorrow? So
Yeah, and I think that's one of the best metrics to see how successful of a leader and how successful the business is if the boss can step away and go start another business or retire or whatever. Like my dad's, yeah, it was so scary for me throughout my early career to think my dad leaving the farm and not having an active role in everything, and but it was because of his training, to myself, that he's been able to, spend time with grandkids or do whatever he wants to do, basically. He comes down here and loves to command and do things and like run the combine or whatever it is he wants to do that day. But if he also wants to go take off and go to Florida that afternoon, which he might, you just never know. With my dad, you'll never know until, he'll be running the combine and be like, "Oh, I'm headed to Idaho," or "I'm headed to Florida," or whatever. And he jumps in and leaves and doesn't even think another thing about it. So, that's the type of, that's what you're want to aim for, is being able to do that. And that way, if you do have another business or another passion that you can jump into, and you've got your business up and rolling, great employees, and you can do that with confidence, and your employees can have confidence in themselves to be able to lead for the next few years or whatever.
So, anyways, we'll see you over on my podcast. See you guys there.